doesn't.
Okay. Is there still a heat wave in New York?
Yeah.
In this apartment, there's always a heat wave.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
Sashi Puki Jukshin Metotram Riram Lingshi Nindyagan Pandi Sangye Shindu Mekte Wagi Drokun Namdak Shingra Chupaksho Idam Gururatna Mandalakam Yaryatayami Sangye Chudam Saki Chognam La Jamshu Padurakni Gapsuchi Taki Chanyen Yepe Sunam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Parshok Sangye Chudam Saki Choknam Ha Jamchu Padudakni Yapsuchi Daki Chanyan Gipe Sunam Ki Drola Penjir Sangye Vipasho Sangye Chudam Soki Choknam La Jamju Padudakni Yapsuchi Daki Chanyan Gipe Sunam Ki Drola Penjir Sangye Vipasho. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I don't know where all your minds went, but something that came for me in this particular mandala offering, I was thinking these last few days since our Hell Realm class, as you've been weathering the heat wave, wherever your mind went to sort of put yourself at ease. Or that's not the way I actually want to put it. I was trying to think, what does it feel like to go for refuge? Like the feeling behind what we're doing when we're chanting those words. And it's whatever state of mind or internal wisdom you have that allowed you to sit with those ideas. Like those descriptions of hell that we went through, as well as the truth of what could cause an experience of that hell. So if you were able to sit with that, to contemplate it for even a moment, to hold some curiosity or investigation around it and not just think of it as some hypothetical, that's refuge. That state of mind, that will protect you is the idea. It'll protect you from at least being blind to it unknowingly, and blind to the possibility that it could actually occur. So that just came to me as we were going through it. Yeah, I'll open it up before I will do a little review of last week, and then I wanted to do a little detour, kind of an amuse-bouche Dharma nugget for, especially I know many of you, it's perhaps your first ACI, so I want to give that to you. It's going through what the 5 paths are, and then we'll get into class 8 content, which is on time, space, and eons. Also, we're still in the Abhidharma Kosha, chapter 3, so it's chock full. But yeah, I'll open it up now. How have the last 2 days been? How were those descriptions, depictions of hell, how have they sat with you? Any questions are also welcome. All right, everyone. I mean, I know it's a lot, and it's only been 2 days, but just see if you can review mentally what we went through Tuesday night and the feelings perhaps it brought up for you. I mentioned this on Tuesday, but I keep thinking about it, the parallels to Dante's Inferno. And even Geshe-la mentioned this when sharing the commentary on the Abhidharma Kosha and the depictions of hell from that perspective. It's almost uncanny how much they mirror the vision that Dante had, guided by Virgil, of these concentric circles of hell that get worse as you go deeper, and that the experience in those places are a reflection of what that being did before, right? So like the language in Dante's Inferno would be the torture is a reflection of the sin. We're not using that language exactly, but karmically, there's a logic to it, right? There's a logic to the specific experience of pain that you're having in these hell realms.
Supriya,
Yes.
I have a question. I know that you talked about it, but I don't remember quite well. How do you escape hell once you are there? How can you get out?
Yes, beautiful. Yeah, I was like Sam asking, how do you get out? I think what makes it hell is not so much the flames or the red hot ground or the daggers on the trees. And it's actually how hard it is to have a state of mind where you could think about getting out. Like that's what actually makes it hell. Hell, it's a mental agony. And I think it's easier for us always sometimes to think of it as the fear and these external tortures, but it's actually the internal torture of never being able to even conceive of being able to get out. Right? Imagine unending pain where you don't even have a moment to like breathe and be like, wait, what if there was something else? You're just constantly being tormented. So one way to address your question, Camilla, is that the difficulty of being able to think about getting out, which is the first step to getting out, right? First, it has to appear as a thought in your mind. That is so difficult, and that is what makes it hell. Having that type of mind that's so clouded by pain and selfishness, because that's the only response you can have to what's going on, that's what makes it a mind that is experiencing hell. It's not the flames. It's not the daggered trees. But that being said, it is possible. There are stories of it, of people in a hell existence that have been able to get out, and it has to do with karma. So it has to do with, it could be maybe a tiny, tiny moment of kindness, or maybe of not harming another hell being, that if karmas expand, that could potentially lead to an escape route. Maybe you make it to a slightly more lukewarm hell, and you can start to shift your karmas. So getting out would be just like getting in, an experience that's forced on you by the karmas in your mind.
I see. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad. I know this will connect to class somehow. I felt compelled to share it after I went on and on about blueberry scones. But Tuesday after class, there were no scones. Instead, the little side project I'm doing is learning how to drive long story. I went to boarding school and then college in the city, so I never learned how to drive, and my parents are very afraid that I'm maybe like the only 26-year-old in the world who doesn't have that life skill. So it's very important to them that I learn how to drive. And I went on a drive with my sister after class on Tuesday. Around the neighborhood is all I'm allowed to do. But I thought of you all because my parents live in kind of like a secluded suburb. We're very used to animal visitors. So I had it in my head that a deer could jump out onto the road, because it's happened before. And of course it did, right? As my sister and I are driving around, it did. And I bring it up because I had spoken to my sister earlier about, I wonder what my impulse will be. Like, I wonder what my instinct will be, since I'm still learning how to drive. I wonder if my instinct would be to just slam on the pedal versus slam on the brake. Like, I just don't know, because I've never been put in that situation, right? Luckily, I did slam on the brake. The deer was fine. We were fine. But I thought of you all because I thought of karma. And I thought, like, that was an experience where I got to observe what karmas my mind was delivering, right? Like, I was in this situation, I could be like, oh, I wonder what my impulse will be. I wonder what my instinct will be. And those situations come along so rarely, right? Because we go through the world convinced of how we're going to be in every situation. Like, we have this model of the room I'm going to walk into and the way I'm going to be and the way that person's going to be and then the way I'm going to respond. Like, it's this choreography that's already choreographed in our minds. And it's so rare that we get those fresh experiences to be like, how would I react? What are those impulses in there? And first you have to notice those before you can start to reprogram them, right? Like, I was happy that happened, because I was like, oh, great, I have a good instinct in mind. If that were to happen, I'm going to slam on the brake. But I hope, please continue to think of karma like that, like this choreography of impulses in your mind that are spewing themselves out at a very high rate. And unless you can begin to notice that, slow it down, concentrate. Generally, meditation is the tool I know best to start to notice that. Unless you can do that, the karmas are just, they rule you and not the other way around. But as soon as you can start to notice that, then you have some agency. Then you actually have some choice. You get to notice the space in between your choices. That's karmic technology. That's operating at the level of the mechanism and not appearance. So I just want to put that out there. When I say karma, it's someone's karma to go to hell, right? It's not this, oh, they're on a cosmic naughty list because of something they did, and thus they got filtered into hell. It's not that. We'll get to what it is. But anyways, this was a little nugget I wanted to share. I picked up my copy of Dante's Inferno from my liberal arts college days, and apparently on the top of the gates to hell, this is what greets someone, these words. So they say, through me you pass into the city of woe. Through me you pass into eternal pain. Through me, among the people lost for aye, justice, the founder of my fabric, moved. To rear me was the task of power divine, supremest wisdom and primeval love. Before me things create were none, save things eternal, and eternal I endure. All hope abandon, ye who enter here. And I just put it here to continue to shake at whatever preconceived notion you already have of hell. Like, I think it's hard to not think of hell as a counterpart to heaven. But from a Buddhist perspective, that's not what we're dealing with, right? If you'd equate like a deva realm, like a pleasure being realm, or maybe a formless realm to heaven in the Buddhist perspective, there's not much difference between heaven and hell. They're both suffering. They're both an experience forced on you by your karma that you're not understanding. And thus it either runs out, the pleasure runs out, or the pain keeps going and you have no idea how to stop it. So in a way, there's no difference between heaven and hell if you don't understand where they come from. So really, more than any of the details of any of the hot or cold hells we went over, if there's one thing you could take away from the way the Abhidharma Kosha presents hell, is that hell is not a place where you go. Instead, it's a projection that you have. Fine print, projection is not, it's not saying hell is a fantasy or a daydream or something imagined. It's real because it is forced by your karma upon something that's otherwise empty, that otherwise doesn't have a nature. I'll pause there, but I want, that's the takeaway from the hell class, if there is one. Does that bring up any responses, questions, thoughts?
Only thing that I wanted to share that strikes me the most in that class, I mean, knowing that was my first experience with anything Buddhist, is there is this constant idea of repetition that I thought was very interesting, because trying to think about something that happens in our life, like when you're kind of like stuck in this kind of like in your brain, and it feels like this notion of repetition is very interesting. I mean, that just a thought, I guess I wanted to share.
No, it's perfect. And it is that it's the wheel of life. It's why we call it cycles of samsara. It is that over and over again until you can see it for what it is, like a pattern or a habit, and you can break it and figure out how to break it, you are stuck. It is that. It's just like rinse and repeat over and over. So that, yeah. It is that. And probably the most insidious habit is the one that we have about how we regard ourselves. Like that habit of whatever that voice in your head is about that tells you who you are. You know, the voice in your head when you wake up in the morning and just starts, I don't know what tone that has for you, but that just starts going off of the type of person you are, or maybe when you do something you're not proud of, or do something you are proud of, and the way that responds, it's that tendency and that looping conversation that we have with ourselves that's actually the most dangerous. And also the most fruitful if we can understand how to change the tune of that conversation. So maybe that's, yeah, sorry. Were you going to say something, Anne-Sophie?
Just thank you.
Hey, Supriya, this is Adam. I just wanted to say I really appreciate that last sentiment. I was thinking earlier and thinking last night, last class was kind of challenging for me. Can't even remember what was going on in the day, but I was really antsy through the class. I felt physically uncomfortable, and, you know, and I didn't even realize it until today that I was like, well, the content, that makes sense that, you know, you were, you know, if you were talking about the heaven realms, I'm sure you would be feeling different in your body, but that, you know, such a far out concept and all those things are so far out. And I remember very clearly you at the beginning of class, and you might've said it later in class, but it dawned on me, it like landed in me later in class when you said, I want you to pay attention to what's coming up for you through the class when we're going through this. I feel like you said that, pay attention to what comes up in your mind or up in your body. And this sentiment is like the relevancy of here and now, of being alive in this body and in this dimension, that just makes a lot of sense, you know, like that's the hell that we can really understand and touch into and pay attention to. These other hot hells and whatnot, it just seem like this far out nightmare. anyway, so I just appreciate that this sentiment right now going forward.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. And know that almost anything that I say that lands is probably because I heard my teacher say it, which includes that. I remember when Hector taught this class, he said that over and over: catch your mind now. Is this are you just ingesting the information? Are you, like, what is your mind doing with it? It's more important than anything. And to the point about hell being, this far away thing, because it can feel that way. The thing that helps me, of course, I don't have one right now. I wish we were together and I could be like, does anyone have a pen? And someone would just give me one. But here, I have a lighter, so we'll use that. The thing that helps, and we're going to talk about time today and how time is bendier than maybe we think. But this exercise is the fastest way, I think, to travel between realms, right? And it's an intellectual thing, and you can't hear it enough times. Hopefully you can hear something new in it every time you hear it. I almost want to get it. It's fine. I'll do a lighter. So this, if you can't tell, is a lighter, which I sort of gave it away. What I should ask is, what is this? And probably before I could even ask it, you put this specific arrangement of pixels together and something in your mind, you don't even have to say it, just emitted to you, oh, it's a lighter. It's a cute lighter in this little beaded case, right? And we're convinced of it. It's this conviction in our mind. So here's how to travel to another realm: is just ask yourself, I don't know if JJ's on this call with her dog, or if Tala, you have your cat nearby, but if you had an animal in the room, they happened to walk past the screen and they saw this object, what would it be for that animal? If it were a particularly curious dog and it really came up.
Toy.
Yeah, I think animals would also, at least this lighter, it's less dangerous because they could chew through this little beaded thing first before any real damage were done. But I think if it were like a really curious dog and it came up to the screen, it could even start salivating. Like it could, just by looking at this object, the same colors and shapes and pixels. In that mind, in that being's mind, there's no doubt, there's no choice. It just springs up, oh, that's something I want to eat. And that's the distance between two realms. It's the difference in projection of, is it a lighter or is it a chew toy? And if you want to go further, what happens when this Zoom call ends and all the humans log off and all the animals log off and this object is just sitting here on my altar? What is it at that time?
It's empty because there are no perceivers to give it a label.
Yeah, it's potential. It's waiting to be experienced. And it's that's the world. Really, it's an experience waiting for it to happen. And that's what I liked about the deer in the headlights moment, is because it was one of those moments where I didn't know what the experience was going to be. I could watch my mind create, or at least observe, an impulse. So exactly where are you? And Sophie, when we can then catch those habits, start to stop those habits, and that's where the if you hear like your whole world can change, every single thing can change, single thing can be transformed. That's how you change the experience of it all, because it's all just waiting to be experienced. It's not screaming at you, this is how to experience me. The direction is this way. This is really hard to do via Zoom, but I hope you're all with me. Yes, is that a hand raise, Viggy?
Yeah, I wanted to just share that I'm having a lot of challenges with that exercise, in the sense that, especially when the question comes up, what is it when no one is around? I feel like when I'm in this class, I'm doing some mental gymnastics to convince myself that it is empty. And I feel like the real answer that comes up for me is like, I don't know. Like that is the answer that keeps coming up. And I wonder if like doing this mental gymnastics prevents me from realizing the answer. Like that is what I'm wondering. And it's like specifically when in the moment where you said that, it's almost like I'm replacing the karmic perception with like your voice or Rachel Webb's voice telling me that it is empty. Like that's what I sense is going on in my head. And something about that feels very wrong to me, in the sense it feels like a moment where I'm like losing my I'm like succumbing to the authority of a teacher or something like that is how it feels. Yeah, and I'm not sure what the right, like, should I just keep succumbing till I believe it so deeply, or will I just be fooling myself by succumbing? That's kind of the question that comes up.
Yeah, thanks for sharing it. I hope others are feeling that way as well, and know that you don't have to believe anything that comes out of my mouth. That's not the point of this class, I promise. I hope you stay in that feeling of I don't know-ness, because that is, in one sense, the essence of emptiness. It is the fact that actually everything is imbued with that I don't know-ness. And something happens when we can start to relate to the world that way. Not that there's nothingness, not that it doesn't matter-ness, but I don't know-ness. That leaves space for something incredible. So I hope you can stay with that. Everything I'm doing, yes, it's just a model. It's just words. It is intellectualizing it. It actually brings us to our next point really nicely, I hope. And until you can start, or you want to ask yourself, go through that mental exercise yourself, it's just a thing you're hearing from this thing you call me. It won't do anything. I wouldn't expect it to. So I'm just sharing it as to the degree of understanding I have, which is not very much, with the hope that it can trigger a chain reaction. The idea is to experience this, and that's what the 5 paths are. So we can get into that.
I guess a quick follow-up question that comes up for me is like, how much do you believe it? How much do you believe, like, how much of your own response is I don't know, and how much of it is empty of nature?
I like that question.
Yeah, I'm trying to like backtrack to when it started to flip for me, because I did not enter Dharma classes wanting to become a Buddhist. Like that was absolutely not my intention. I had no interest in spirituality. I was very type A. I was very much like, my brain space is too precious for meditation. And like, I just don't have time for that. That was the Supriya that encountered this stuff. So the thing that got me doing the emptiness exercise, for me, was when someone did the pen thing or the lighter thing for me and then said, that applies to everything in your life. And the biggest thing I was dealing with in my life at that time was a pain which I couldn't pinpoint the cause. And no doctor could pinpoint the cause, no friend, no book, no internet search. So that was the thing where I was like, oh, okay, if what you're saying is true and I can apply it to this seemingly uncaused pain that I was having, then I might go with you. Like that was the proof I needed. And it didn't work right away. And a lot of other things, as in applying emptiness to a lot of other different things and seeing them transform, worked before that initial pain really transformed. At that point, it was not surprising to me when I saw that flip. But I'm probably simplifying it. I don't know. I just jumped in because nothing else was working.
Yeah.
I feel really, really called to share something quickly, but if we have to move on, we can.
I think we have time and then we can go through this.
Okay. Just that, like for me, for example, I don't come to this class from that perspective because I have found other things that work for me in the way of what you're describing in certain ways. But I come to this class with like desire to develop more practices and also interest in whatever, it doesn't matter. But one of the things I really liked about what Vicky just asked, and like this question of I don't know versus it is emptiness, seems so critical to me. And one of the things, I know I keep bringing up this question around essence, and I actually wrote an essay like a few days ago around essence that I would share with anyone who wants and what it is. But I found these practices through anthroposophy like 20 years ago or whatever that kind of deal with this similar idea of emptiness, but rather than saying the thing is emptiness, it says, meditate on the thing with complete attention over and over, and you can see into it, and in a way into its essence, which again, like it gets into this kind of semantics question of what we actually mean by emptiness. But there's no question that the pen is different to a person than a dog. Like there's really no question. But the question of what the pen is, it's not a pen as in like it writes or it's a chew toy. It could be kind of anything, but it also is something particular that makes it different from what water is. So you can spend a ton of time like meditating on the thing itself and trying to remove your conditioning, like not see it as a pen, not name and label those things, but just look into its qualities and allow those qualities to just enter your consciousness again and again. And then like meditate on a tree and see and sense over time what is different about a tree than when you meditate on a computer, for example. Something is different. It doesn't mean, that the computer can't change and become something else when it becomes garbage or someone throws it out, but just that you can sense behind the thing. And I just wanted to share that because it was a really powerful concept for me, and also because I feel like in a way that's the same as living in the I don't know center of something. Like it's obviously not a chew toy, it's obviously not a pen, it's obviously not you can light it on fire, you can do all these things, but its essence is unknown. And maybe that is semantically what emptiness means, but I love that idea of sitting in the question forever. So thank you for letting me share. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that meditation technique, and something you brought up, I will clarify this for everyone. When we say something is empty or something has its emptiness, please always think of it as a negation or as a lack of something, right? And the thing that it's lacking, it is that knowing. It is that conviction of what it should be or what it's supposed to be, or its nature from its own side. The fact that that thing doesn't exist is its emptiness. Yeah, so that's why we always say emptiness is a negative thing, not a positive, not as in good and bad, but it's the lack of something rather than the way something is. All we're saying is the way things are. And this is what helped me with the pain thing, where I was like, okay, cool, you can tell me my pain is empty of a nature, but I'm still feeling it. So it's real. So tell me something about the way it is. The way it's not is it's not self-existent. It doesn't exist on its own. The way it is, the other side of emptiness, is it's dependent. It's dependently arising. It's a karma spooling out of my mind. It does exist. This is a lighter. It works. If I hadn't pressed the brakes last night, my dependently arising car would have hit the dependently arising deer, and we all might have had to go to the dependently arising hospital. It's real, this world. It's just, how is it real? That's what for me, Dharma class started to, I never knew to ask that question. What makes my world real? Especially since I could get the sense that the world I experience is different from the one everyone else does. Each of us have our own.
But then why use a sentence that does not encode that? That is the confusion that's been like alive in me for so long, which is like, why say something like it is empty of a nature? Because I really resonate with what you shared, that think of it in this way. I'm like really confused why that language is used at all. Like why is, because that is a very specific language.
Which Biggie?
The statement that saying something like it is empty of a nature is a very specific language, which in itself does not encode this nuance of the perception aspect of it, which you clarified right now by saying by talking about what it is not. And there is this like idea and like broader philosophy, which I mentioned on the code of conduct document that we were discussing, which is like via positiva and via negativa. Like there is two ways of describing things, like talk about what it is and talk about what it is not. And there is many schools of philosophy. I won't generalize too much, but there's like a few schools of philosophy that agree that via negativa is actually the more robust way of describing truly what we know, whereas like via positiva tends to have like a lot of flaws. So in that sense, like it is empty would fit into that via positiva construct, like it is empty of a nature, whereas saying that I don't know what its true nature is fits more into like the like via a negative construction of a sentence, like and I guess I've been feeling a lot of like resistance to these like positive concrete statements, the same way I feel about like life is suffering. It is such a strong statement, and then when we go into the nuance of it, we say life is suffering and it is also beautiful, but the suffering persists, right? Which is like the full nuance of it. And I'm curious why these like strong positive statements are used. And I have a story that it like these specific phrasings like life is suffering and it is empty of a nature, like these phrasings come from like the modern 2020 Western world, which wants like bite-sized wisdom that can go viral quickly, that can attract attention quickly, because life is suffering is a more like grabs more attention than say other versions of the phrasing, which is like life has a lot of unsatisfactoriness. Unsatisfactoriness is a constant in life. Like that is another version of the first noble truth that I've come across, which is not as exciting to hear. You know, like if I say that to a group of people, this, sorry?
That it's not as Instagrammable.
It is not as Instagrammable. And I'm just wondering if like these phrasings have come from this like social media culture that we live in, and full disclosure, like I work at Facebook, so I feel like guilty of like bringing about or contributing to this like change, and like it's been like really causing a lot of challenges in me as I like hear these sentences more. And I guess the fear is that are we like spreading incorrect dharma is the fear that comes up in me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very valid, and it's why whenever possible, I'll give the source of where these ideas are coming from. So, for example, for most of this course, it has been the Abhidharma Kosha by Master Vasubandhu and the commentary by the first Dalai Lama, right, which we have been introduced to. Yes, in the process of putting it into words like English, like the limited vocabulary I have, things will happen. And so always check me on that. But it actually, I think a lot of what we're speaking to kind of gets at the 5 paths. So if you can hold all of these things, please. Yeah. And I think it'll help. You know, I have no notes to go through this. I just want to share it openly, especially for those who aren't familiar with it. Everything within the ACI courses, my teacher said it this way, and it was beautiful, I thought. He said that we think we're getting the puzzle pieces, right? We think in each course we're getting a new puzzle piece, like each idea, each practice, it's a new piece of the puzzle. And he said that's not actually true. That's not how Dharma works. Because Dharma, like you're saying, Dharma can't be expressed in words. That's not what Dharma is. It has a nature a lot more unchanging than that. So what all we're getting through these ideas, it's actually just unveiling puzzle pieces inside our own mind, like in our own consciousness, or if you call it soul or psyche or whatever you want to call it. It's making those pieces available and making those connections possible. So there starts to be this connection between the way you see yourself and the way you see your world, or the way you see yourself move through the world, and then the way the world responds, or the way your inner world responds more than anything, that tone of voice in your head, the thoughts you have. So I like that. I'm not sure if I'm communicating it, but this is one of the everything we share in these Dharma classes fits into something that you see on this map. So this map, it's called the 5 paths, and it's like the milestones in the career of a Dharma practitioner, let's say. And it does not matter if you are Buddhist or not. Think of it outside of those confines. Those are, we call things Buddhist or Christian or some agnostic. That's not, wisdom doesn't have that nature. So anyways, here, before the 5 paths is actually pre-path, and that's basically whatever version of you just went through the world unexamined. Like you just went through the world based on what people told you to do or what you heard to be true. I don't know. I think we all have some version of this before you sort of were like, wait a second, maybe there's more. That's pre-path. Then the first one you see, Soglam in Tibetan, it's called the path of accumulation. That's why the A is there. And the path of accumulation is essentially you hitting the wall of, I don't know, over and over again. So it's whatever. And so for me, it was that instance of, I don't know where my pain is coming from. Like, I don't know why I'm doing everything right, but I'm still not happy. It's hitting that wall of suffering. Whenever that happened to you, you do it enough times where it sort of shakes something in you. And that's what you're doing in the path of accumulation. You're actually accumulating the causes to want to ask, how do I get out of this cycle? Why do I keep getting caught in habits that I didn't know I was making? Soglam, that's the first path of accumulation. Then you move into the path of preparation. And this, I like hearing the frustration in your voice, Viggy, because that is what defines the path of preparation. It's essentially you hearing emptiness explanations in as many ways as possible. There are thousands of ways to explain emptiness, even just within ACI. Like, I'm trying to think of which course has the most. Probably ACI 15 has the most. Kind of, we have to use metaphor to describe it, but there are countless explanations for every single mind out there. The Buddha has given some teaching on emptiness. so that it reaches that mind. So that's the path of preparation, is you hear, they say the pen thing 30,000 times. You ask yourself as you walk down the New York street, oh, is that skyscraper empty of a nature? Is my annoying boss empty of a nature? Is my partner, is the partner I want to have empty of a nature? That's the whole path. It's emptiness. It's moving your mind through that. It's also gaining the practices. It's learning how to meditate. It's learning about the laws of karma. If things dependently arise, then how does that process happen? So we've gone through the 4 lists of karma. Path of preparation, Jorlam. Then this thing we keep skirting around, which is where all doubt goes away. And you do get a sense of conviction about what that I don't know-ness is. It doesn't mean you become all-knowing. It just means you have a sense of conviction in the way the universe is not. Right? You have a sense of really a conviction of the way things are not. And then from that, you can start to act in accord with the way things really are. I hope I'm not being too coded, but this is Songlam S, the path of seeing. It's the direct experience of emptiness. It occurs in meditation, so it's not an intellectual thing. It's not an aha moment that you're going to get from someone talking about a lighter. But every time you think about lighters or the emptiness of lighters, that will create the cause to have that experience. But it's an experience in deep meditation, they say, just about 20 minutes. For those of you who are with us earlier in the course, this is the experience during which your mind has actually moved into the form realm, the first level of the form realm. So you're completely disattached from objects of the senses. And it's the difference between reading a romance novel and falling in love. It's the experience of it, which breaks out of, shakes everything out of just what you thought it was. Direct experience of emptiness. Hopefully, if you've prepared through ACI, that experience isn't just a direct experience of emptiness, but it's also done with bodhicitta in your heart. Meaning, it's exactly that question who asked it in the beginning, Camilla. It's that feeling of how do you get out? And having that as a wish in your heart, not just how do I get out, but how do I help others get out too? Like, how do I help others see that they're also caught in their own delusions and their own stories? And if I want to get out of that cycle, well, why wouldn't they? So when you have that in your heart, that's called bodhicitta, the wish to get enlightened for the sake of all beings, not just yourself. That peak experience, the direct experience of emptiness with bodhicitta, will then lead to path 4, Gomlam. Gom is actually the word for meditation in Tibetan. And that path is called the path of habituation, which is getting used to what you saw. Yes. You have this deep experience about the nature of reality, the fact that nothing is the way it seems. But then, like all meditation sessions, you open your eyes and the world reasserts itself. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I'll have this amazing meditation. I'll be totally in bliss land with my teacher, just virtue beaming out and, all these things. And then I go downstairs to have chai with my family and I get angry at my sister, in 2 seconds. And the world just reasserts itself. I don't remember that she's empty of a nature from her own side and that the way I treat her is going to have a boomerang. No, it's just impulse again. It's just habit vomits up. So that's the path of habituation, is starting to it's really actively deprogramming that. Is recognizing that the impulses are still going to be there, but now you have the fuel from your direct experience to counteract them. So you're rehabituating yourself to seeing the world that way. That takes anywhere between 7 lifetimes to 1 lifetime before full Buddhahood. in this system. So, okay, that's the other thing I think that attracted me to, Viggy, your question of like, when did I become a believer, which I wouldn't classify myself as, but I'm obviously biased. But what really did attract me to this was actually that I could see a path, like that I was not just given a theory and a set of practices, but I was also given this A to Z map, which no one was going to hold my hand through, but it was completely available to me. And sort of the final point, which really feels like the best beginning on this map, is the last path, no more learning, or Melop Lam. No more learning sounds misleading. It's not like Buddha's don't, omniscience doesn't mean that you know every note, or you know every detail of every academic subject. I mean, it does include that, but that's not super exciting. The omniscience we're talking about here is that you would be able to, for example, if I had this, I would know, Viggy, exactly what explanation of emptiness to share that would cut through to your specific heart and open something up. Like, I don't have that power now, so I'm working with what I've got. But Buddha's mind is omniscient. It could read other people's minds. And the only impulse is compassion. The only thing you'd want for someone else is to have the realizations you've had. So you can, that's why they say anytime the Buddha is speaking, it's a teaching, it's Dharma. That's real Dharma. And so that's what that final path brings you to that state. Yeah. So I wanted to give this because I felt like so much of this course, ACI 8, is like giving us the paths of like traveling within the wheel of life, like all the trapdoors, like here's how to get from hell to a little bit better than hell, and a craving spirit or animal and human, and how to make all those little loop-de-loops. But like the backdrop to all of that is we're not trying to stay there. Like, we're not trying to stay in the cycle. We're trying to get out of the cycle. And there is a path for that. There's 5 paths, actually. Here they are. Again, just watch what your mind is doing with this stuff and how it's digesting it. I can pause for a moment for any questions or reactions. Many of you have studied the 5 paths in here in a lot more detail. So that was like a very, very quick intro to them. Someone remind me which course we go into them in detail. I think it's ACI 2. 1. I see Tala's finger. 1. Okay. ACI 1, very first one. 3 principal paths. Try not to make it a list. I mean, if you can, think about something in your life, like some moment you had where you learned something which fundamentally changed the way you interact with the world. If you've ever had that, you've gone through a mini version of these 5 paths. Like maybe it was, I'm trying to think of an example. Okay, honestly, like the example that comes to mind, maybe Sarah and Adam, this is because I can see your faces right here, but it was not that long ago before, like I knew I had organs, but I didn't know very much about them. Like I went through life, I was like, yes, I have this functioning human body, and I just took my organs for granted and all my internal systems for granted. So that was pre-path. And that was path of accumulation and preparation, was like me learning about these internal organs on a need to know basis. Like when something broke, maybe I would learn a little more about it. But otherwise, not too interested. For me, the experience of like what I could equate to a path of seeing would be meeting a teacher who actually taught me how to feel, how to sense those organs at a really subtle level and work with them in my yoga practice and work with others, like start to recognize other people's organs and feel for them through acupressure. Like that's how it came up for me, that experience. It's a visceral thing. I'm just describing it to you now, but if you've never had someone touch an acupressure point on you that opened your heart, you don't know what I'm talking about. but it's possible. There's the analogy for path of seeing. Path of habituation, I now almost every single day think about my organs. I can't help but think about them. When I'm afraid, I think about my bladder and my kidney. You know, when I'm nervous, I think about my pericardium. Like I just can't, I've re-habituated myself the way I move through the world. That lens just comes up. This was maybe a weird analogy, but I was just trying to say, I think all of you have had an experience of something that was completely outside of your consciousness and then made its way into your consciousness and infused the way you do everything. That's what we're talking about here, not an intellectual pursuit per se.
I have a question, just a quick question.
Yes, please.
Can you only go through these 5 paths and get enlightened if you're a human in the desire realm? Okay, yes. That's what I thought.
That's the idea. So that's what we say when we say like the best birth, the ideal birth to have is a human with access to Dharma. It's for this reason. Yeah, any other birth, I think the best you could do would be to get close to having a human rebirth so that you could have these experiences. But you need to have a human vehicle to have a mind that can sustain all of these things for long enough, right? Like not just sustain the experience in meditation, but sustain a wrestling with your own reality. Because that's what's required in all of these, in at least path A, P, and H.
Is this linear? Do you ever get to S and go back to A?
Yeah, I think pre-path, path of accumulation, and path of preparation are very intermingled. That's my experience. The idea with path of seeing is you've seen something that you can't unsee because you're seeing an ultimate truth. At that time, you're seeing the thing behind everything else. So once you've had that experience, we actually say you become a different type of being. So in a sense, you're no longer a human. After the path of seeing, you are called a stream enterer or an Arya. So the 4 noble truths, mistranslated, are actually the 4 Arya truths, in that for someone who's had that experience, those truths really are truths for them. That's why we call them the 4 Arya truths. That Jetop Yeshe that you see, that subsequent wisdom, that's the 4 Arya truths. You know them for real. You know really what it means when we say life is suffering. You know really what it means that there's a cause to that suffering. Therefore, an end and a path to get there. So once you've hit path of seeing, you can't go back. Actually, this is why I wanted to share this with you all, is also once you've gone through the path of preparation, as in once you've gained an intellectual understanding of emptiness, you cannot be reborn as an animal being, a craving spirit, or a hell being. Once you've heard and it's not just like I don't know if any of you have like a mental checklist of number of times I've heard the pen thing. It's not as much that, it's more once you really get an intellectual understanding of this stuff, you're forced to behave in a certain way in your world. And that way of behaving makes it impossible for you to do something that would cause you to go to the hell realms, to have the projection of being in the hell realms. Let me say it that way. Does that make sense? Yes, that's the path of preparation, Sam. So the closest thing I can think of it, I'll just use driving as an example again. Like I had all these misconceptions about driving, like how terrifying it was and how I'd be like squished by a truck on the freeway and things like that. And until I learn I'm learning now the mechanics of driving, I'm now realizing, if I really understand them, the mechanics of it, how a situation such as being squished by a truck on the highway, I know what to do so that that situation is impossible. You see what I mean? I understand the rules, so I'm not going to let myself get into that situation. And that's the way it works. If you really understand karma and emptiness enough and apply it to your reality, you can't hurt other people. Or at least if you do, you would know how to purify it. You'd quickly do something to purify it. You can't harm others. You can't act with ignorance. You can't further delude yourself. Therefore, you make hell an impossibility, because hell is a caused thing. It's a projection. So that's why I wanted to share, is I felt like I wanted to give you some good news after last class. Okay. I hope there's more questions than answers. That's all I can do. But let's get into today's class. Okay. Description of time, space, and eons, yeah? I struggled with this class because you'll see as we go through it, but it makes everything, there's so much detail in the description of how time functions and how worlds are created and destroyed. So I just want to preface it all with, I hope you like my GIF, Sarah. Yeah. I want to preface it all with, yes, time is empty of a nature from its own side. And I feel like that's actually one of the easier ones to prove. If any of you have been parents or know people who are parents, I think that's the best proof. I was DMing one of our karma yogis the other day. If any of you know Brooks, he might have greeted you at 3 Jewels before, but he just had a small baby. And he was DMing me and he's like, yeah, Supriya, just so you know, time has no meaning. Like, this newborn child has absolutely proven that to me. There is no such thing as, what is night, what is day, what is weekend, what is weekday. Like, it's very clear to a new parent that time is malleable. And you all know this, right? Like how when you're with your favorite person, time goes like this versus when you have a headache, time slows down. So yes, everything we're talking about tonight is empty of a nature from its own side, yet it does exist. It has a realness to it. The only realness, it's the realness that's dependent upon the karmas within the perceiver's mind. So I'll leave that preface. But we're going to start with the 4 types of eons or kalpas. Okay, so there's 4. The eon of destruction, the eon of formation. We're going to go over all these in detail. The eon of continuation, and then what's called the great eon. And then I'm just adding a 5th one because it'll come up throughout the course, and it's called an intermediate eon. And you can see the Tibetan there. I won't try to pronounce it. Actually, I will. It's not too difficult. So eon of destruction is our Jikpe Kalpa. And we have our Chakpe Kalpa, eon of formation. Think of it with regard to the world. So we're going to be talking about the destruction of the world. The time that it takes is known as the Jikpe Kalpa, that eon of destruction. Then there's the eon of formation, it coming into being. The time in between the formation and the destruction is the eon of continuation, the Nipe Kalpa. And then the great eon, you'll see why that becomes relevant, the Kal Chen. Chen like great, like Lamrim Chenmo. Same use there. Okay, so that's like setting the scene. We have to get there together first. So now we're gonna actually begin with the eon of continuation. Okay, so the eon of continuation, couple things. First, you'll see this intermediate eon term that we talked about, right? A bar call. Think of it as like a unit of time, right? The same way we label a unit of time as an hour or a minute. So there's a unit of time, it's an intermediate eon, And the eon of continuation is made up of 20 of these intermediate eons. You can see a chart here. You can see like the first 3, imagine they keep going like sine waves, and there's 20 in total. And that makes up an eon of continuation. A couple more details here. So the whole length is 20 intermediate eons. And then, okay, here we go. So the way that the passage of time is defined is by the lifetimes of the beings and how they change, which I think could make sense, like the same way we talk about like the average lifespan in the Renaissance versus now. Like we speak in that way too. So here, basically think about it as, think about it as lifespans beginning actually at a very, very high number. They call it like a indeterminable length. So huge life, very long lifespans. And at the point of the eon of continuation beginning, they're at about 80,000 years. So a being that we call human is living to be about 80,000 years. And we see over the eon of continuation, that lifespan will shrink down to the size of to the length of just 10 years, and then we'll rise up again to 80,000, shrink back to 10. And that's how time is recorded. It's the generations of lifetimes expanding and shrinking. Are you with me? I'll try again. I see some head nods. The easiest way I can think of it is like, think about the way we describe the world now, right? Where we say, oh, well, at a certain point, humans had an average lifespan of 20 years, right? And then we got more advanced and we, it increased a bit, but we were prone to sicknesses and like the plague. And so it was still at like a measly, 30, 40 years. And now it's getting better and we have more technology and we understand medicine more. So it's longer. So think about it that way, right? And like we measure time that way, the average lifespan of beings in that time. So all we're saying is that in an eon of continuation, there's 20 of these segments of time, and a segment is defined by the lifetimes of beings going from 80,000 to 10 years. It's that many generational shifts. Does that sort of make more sense? It's hard because I can't say, oh, an intermediate eon is 50 years. Like I can't, we want to put it that way, but it's not like that. It has to do with the type of beings that live in that time period.
So we are like on our way to the average lifespan being 80,000 years.
So we're going to get, by the end of this class, we will find out where we are, which is actually, we're in the phase of lifespans being about 100 years long. That's where we are, right? Which is in between going from 10 to 80,000, 80,000 back to 10. It's saying it does this over and over again until the world is destroyed. So we'll get to, by the end of this, we are in the eon of destruction, actually, right? We're nearing the end of what we call existence on planet Earth. And we're at the point where lifetimes are about 100 years.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. It's weird, but just think about what some extraterrestrial being came to Earth and we were like, yes, so hello, there's a thing called a year and a thing called, a generation. Like these are all models we're putting onto an experience of time. So this is just a different way to do that. But one thing I want to share about why do lifespans expand and shrink? So they say that what's happening in the eon of continuation, like over this time, is that humans invent more and more weapons. They create different ways of living. So some of them move into cities, some of them stay in countries. And the thing that causes the swings in the length of their life It has nothing to do with medical advancement. It has everything to do with the presence of non-virtues in people's minds or not. Non-virtue being anything that causes you an experience of harm in the future. So it's how often are people lying or killing each other, killing other beings? How often are they being jealous or possessive or ignorant in general? All the 10, we've gone through the 10 non-virtues. So they say basically there'll be long periods of time where all these beings are just mired in the non-virtues, and as a result, lifetimes shrink. They see the karmas to be alive shrink. And then they say, like beings start to recognize this and they feel all this remorse and they're like, oh wait, no, I want to be a good person. And the pendulum swings the other way and lifetimes begin to expand again. That's where the expanding and shrinking is coming in.
We're on our way up, or we're on our way, I mean, we're kind of on our way to 80,000, right?
No, we'll see where we are. We're actually not, we're outside of the eon of continuation. So you see here how like eon of continuation is flanked by the eon of formation and the eon of destruction, which is what we're going to get to next. We are squarely within the eon of destruction.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to go on. I hope that was just trippy enough. So now we're going to go to the eon of formation. I wanted to just give that first because it helps establish what an intermediate eon is. And you're going to see that come up and again and again. So the eon of formation, they say that the way it begins, we've already talked about this, right? Remember when we talked about the gentle wind beginning to spiral and form this disk that holds the world, the physical basis for the world, when we talked about it like 2 classes ago? That opening is the start of the eon of formation. And then they say that the eon of formation ends, right, gives way to the eon of continuation when the first being is born in Avicii hell. You remember that's hell ring number 8, the worst one, the hell of no respite. So the first time someone takes birth there, that marks, okay, formation eon is done, now we're in continuation eon. The story here, I think I've told this before. This was sort of that story around, it's almost like a Garden of Eden-esque story of like when the world began, all the beings were made of radiant light and they were in kind of this form of bliss. They didn't need to eat anything, but if they did, they could just, go down and lick the ground and they would get the nourishment they need, right? And then from that experience, coveting, started to form, or hoarding, or starting to do things to think of yourself or take care of yourself, thereby mental afflictions and the whole story. So I think we've talked about that before, eon of formation. So if you have that picture from the slide before in your mind, this is when we went from a lifetime, it's called a seme, that's like 10 to the 30th, they say, some multiple of that, so very, very long lifetime, and it hits the point 80,000, and then we enter that graph. I'll go back. But so you can see here, the eon of formation started with, this line is representing the lifetime of the being. So it starts at a very high point, innumerable, a seme, they say, 10 to the 30th. Once it hits 80,000 years, once the physical world is formed, then we're in the eon of continuation.
Can I ask what being this is in relation to? Is this all desire realm beings? Is this all beings? Is this humans? Like, what being are we talking about?
Yes, great question. Mainly, I think when I'm saying being, think human, but you will start to see how other, we'll start to talk about hell beings as well. I think it does encompass all beings in the desire realm. I think that's true. but the vantage point we're taking is humans. So like when I say lifetimes, I mean the lifetimes of what we call a human being.
Okay, thanks.
But yes, animals are included in this, and hell realms and craving spirits and all the other ones we've talked about. But when I say being, think human, unless I say otherwise. I'll try to be really clear over there. Okay, so we talked about eon of formation, eon of continuation, and then the eon of destruction. Je Tsongkapa. Okay, so here, the eon of destruction begins when no more beings are taking birth in hell. No more beings are having projections of at least this hell that we've studied, right? Avicii hell, the hell of no respite. The idea being beings who have the karma to experience hell, they're just taking birth on a different planet's hell realm. So what we're talking about here is like the end of the earth, right? The end of the destruction of this planet from the perspective of the Abhidharma Kosha. So the eon of destruction begins by, oh, there's no more beings appearing in this hell, in our hells. And then it's complete when the world has been destroyed. The outer physical world has come to its end. The length of the eon of destruction is also 20 intermediate eons, just as a unit of time. Think about that. Oh yeah, there's a little more detail here. So here, in the 20 intermediate eons of the length of an eon of destruction, the first 19 of them, this is how they're described. The desire realm begins to empty out. Hopefully this gets at the question I was just asked. So the desire realm begins to empty out, meaning all animals, craving spirits, and hell rebirths are occurring on different planets. And humans begin to be able to hold meditative concentration and actually ascend to form realm levels. So we start emptying out the desire realm. And in the 20th one, we'll get into more detail here, but this is a description of what happens to the physical planet. They say it takes one intermediate eon, the 20th one. And we'll go into more detail, but it's not far off from what climate scientists predict is currently in the process of happening. But yes, it's acknowledging that this physical world that we have is going to end. And this is how the Abhidharma Kosha says it would end. So let's go there. The end of the world. I put this photo here of this image here again. Hopefully this reminds us, this is the world as it's presented in the Abhidharma Kosha, right? Mount Meru in the center, the 4 continents, the rings of oceans and such. So here they say that first the world will be destroyed by fire, and then by water, and then by wind. And here are the details for how it's destroyed by fire. Essentially the sun supernovas 7 times. So the heat of the sun increases, it supernovas, and a second sun rises, creating even more tremendous heat. You have a 3rd, 4th, and 5th supernova, causing all water bodies to evaporate. So if you remember, like the 9 oceans we went through, all of those begin to evaporate. The 6th sun rises, and Mount Meru and the 4 continents begin to dissolve in a cloud of smoke. 7th sun, the whole world engulfed in a single flame, destroying it in fire. The idea being that that final fire triggers a parallel fire in the form realm level, and the mansions there burn. I don't want to get too caught in the details, But I do think it's a nice time to ask yourself, like, how do you think this planet will be destroyed? Do you have conviction that it will? Even if it doesn't happen in your lifetime. So you get a lot of interesting things if you Google, how will the world be destroyed? So I got more detailed and I was like, how will planet Earth end? And there's many theories. They're all obviously theories, that some of which sound very similar to this. And there's others, but.
Supriya, what are the 7 suns that it's talking about?
Yeah, so I was like considering, do I spend time researching what a supernova is? I hope maybe someone here has more knowledge about what it means for a sun to supernova. My understanding is just that the sun, being a star, heats up, expands, and multiplies.
Got it.
And that's what this is referring to. Like, that's what it means by there's multiple suns. But if someone who has more space knowledge than I can clarify, that's what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Chloe, I thought it'd be destroyed by global warming and plastic waste. I mean, global warming, climate change, they're just words and labels we're putting to this experience, right? So you could call it, oh yeah, there's a tremendous heat and there's suns supernovaing and it, right? Like, these are all words we're using. I was caught by how similar they sound, right? We're seeing these things happen, that water bodies are evaporating, heat is, overall temperature of the planet is rising. I think it's just the words we use. We'll feel less stressed about plastics now. I think we should still be stressed about plastic use.
Yeah,
this absolves us from that.
This is actually structurally saying that this is good. Like, we are ascending to the form realm and the world will be destroyed. Wait, in year 20, it's like, so humans begin entering the form realm in intermediate year 20. And that sounds like a positive development, right?
Well, the form realm is still within suffering, so
maybe not, maybe it's not. So the, yeah.
So
okay.
The cycle we're talking about is just another cycle on top of all the cycles we've already talked about. The idea is the world gets created and destroyed endlessly. This is just giving us details into what that looks like for a physical planet.
I see. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And all the while, beings forced by their karma are taking rebirth in different forms.
And on different planets.
That is the idea. Yes. So like, for example, here when it's saying, if you were to have the karma to experience hell, but you're near the eon of destruction on planet Earth, cool, well, you're going to take hell realm birth on a different planet.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's apparently people are very hesitant to teach, especially this chapter of the Abhidharma Kosha, for exactly this reason. Like, it's so easy to get caught in these details of, like, you know, these minutiae of eons and worlds being created and destroyed. So that is always interesting to me. Why did Geshe-la include it in the ACI curriculum? What is it doing to our minds to consider this? I think there's a lot of merit just to dealing with the reality that this physical world will come to an end. That should probably change the way you interact with it. So I think that's helpful. But I think it's also, it's what we were talking about in the beginning. I think it's healthy to come up to the edge of, like, our experience of what we know to be true. You know, like, we just assume that us as a generation, like, this time we are the most educated. We have the most access to technology and ways of knowing. And so our view of the way the world was created and the way the world will end is the one that's right. But the generation that comes after us will say that we were wrong. So it makes me think of that too. Okay, what else do I have? Okay, we're nearing the end. So remember how there were 4 types of eons. So we've talked about the eon of formation, the eon of continuation, the eon of destruction. And then there's this thing called the great eon. And you'll see why it's relevant. So just bear with me a little bit. Oh, here, I gave this little visual. So eon of formation, eon of continuation, eon of destruction are each 20 intermediate eons long, right, in unit of time. So there's that little timeline for you. The length of a great eon is 80 intermediate eons. So 4 times one of those. So there you have that. Why are we talking about this? Okay, little bit of math. It's not too much, I promise. But here they introduce the term countless. Like you might have heard this in scripture when you hear, countless lifetimes, countless rebirths. It's actually referring to a specific number, which is 10 to the 60th. So when we say countless, that's what it's referring to. And this is relevant because what this chapter in the Abhidharma Kosha says is that the experience of Buddhahood, which is also a projection upon an otherwise empty experience, right? So that Buddhahood, that 5th path of no more learning in the 5 paths, the amount of time it takes to get that experience, because it's a caused thing, right? It doesn't just happen. It takes 3 countless great eons worth of accumulating merit and wisdom. So we'll talk about what merit and wisdom are, but just, are you all with me from a time perspective? It's taking 3 times 10 to the 60th intermediate eons to reach Buddhahood, according to this system. This is what it's saying. What is the accumulation of merit and wisdom? Someone chime in, because I at least am tired of hearing my own voice. Merit and wisdom. Someone here knows these terms. I'm sure of it.
Merit creates the body of a Buddha, the Rupakaya, and wisdom creates the Dharmakaya, the emptiness of the mind of a Buddha. And the way you accumulate merit as a bodhisattva is considering the first 4 of the 6 perfections, which is the perfection of giving, perfection of ethics, perfection of patience, perfection of joyful effort. And then the last 2 create the wisdom body, which is the perfection of concentration and perfection of wisdom.
Boom. Yeah, exactly. This is Santi for those who don't know. It's exactly that. I recognize maybe some of you haven't heard those words before, but I'll try to summarize it this way. Vicky, to your earlier question around when did this stuff start becoming something I did not because someone was telling me to or was inspiring me to, but out of my own choice or desperation or joy. It took all those forms. It's when you start to realize the difference, I think, between karma and this, the accumulation of merit and wisdom. So if you come to 3 Jewels long enough, you're going to hear things like, oh, well, here's how you create your perfect partner. Here's how you make the angry boss go away. And it applies even to, here's how you dismantle systems of oppression in the world you see. You can use karmic techniques for all of that. And you'll do it, and I hope your inner world will start to change. It actually becomes less about the results you see outside and more about the results you feel inside. Like your thoughts begin to change. The way I saw myself and others began to change. There was way more space. There was way more openness. And yeah, there's way more space. And at a certain point, you come to the realization that even karma ends. That the function of karma is still within the wheel of life. It's still within that suffering realm. Remember when we talked about stained sustenance? It's that. It has that quality. It functions, and it's infinitely better to operate on the level of karma than it is on the level of ignorance, of just letting things happen. Much better to start to investigate why do things happen and try to operate on that level. But then until you inject it with emptiness, it's just another thing you're doing. It's just busy collecting good karma, right? Like before I was trying to be good because I wanted to make my parents happy, or I wanted to make society happy. And then I got a little bit of freedom to be like, oh, wait, no, I want to be good because it's good karma. But even that, you're caught. Even that is a conditioning. So when you jump into the accumulation of merit and wisdom, when you're doing things not to be good, but to be free, you're aiming for liberation, for a sort of Buddhahood. Merit and wisdom are just doing good things, planting karma, but with the injection of emptiness into them, so that they don't wear out. I don't know if it's hard because I could give you the exact definitions, and that's what Santi gave perfectly, but the feeling of it is, it's like working with a fuel that doesn't ever run out. It's not just like putting better fuel in your car. It's like figuring out what fuels fuel to begin with and working there. So I'll leave it at that. But the point here, this is actually, so if you hear this, it should feel scary, because 3 countless great eons, like that's a long time to do the 6 perfections. You should feel like, wait, what? That's a long time. If you got anything out of the way we presented time so far. So the asterisk is that's through the sutra method, that's what it would take, according to the Abhidharma Kosha. It take 3 countless great eons to accumulate the fuel that you need to, for real, have a projection of a paradise, of complete perfection, of seeing yourself as a Buddha and your world as a paradise. Possible, but takes a long time. So I'll leave that there. We've just mentioned probably a few times in this course Tantra, and I don't know what all conceptions you have of that word when you hear it. It's a loaded word. What I will say is that it's the alternative to the sutra method. It's saying, oh, you don't want to take 3 countless great eons? You want to do all of that? Because it's necessary. You do need the Buddhahood. It's still a cause thing. It doesn't come from nowhere. You want to do it faster, like in just 1 lifetime? That's the method. And that's literally all I can share about it. So I don't know what I have nothing else to share about it.
Is it 1 human lifetime? Or
Mhm.
one
human lifetime.
Cool.
I think so. Yeah, I think it would be 1 human lifetime. within your lifetime. Whoever the perceiver is that's asking that question, it would be for them. Let's say that.
So what I'm hearing is this ACI course is basically a user acquisition campaign for the Tantra method.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I mean, if I were to conceive of someone who's actually been able to realize, to go through those 5 paths and have the experiences on them, and was looking back and being like, okay, I can't force anyone else to come with me. I want to trigger these things in other people. If it's possible for me, it must be possible for others. How do I get them there? How do I get them to move their own minds there? Yes, that's a great way to put it. You have to give them all the sutra. You have to give them all the methods. You have to ground it in karma and emptiness. And that's all of what ACI is, all 18 courses. And it is absolutely, because that's the most compassionate thing you could do for someone, is acquire them as a user into the tantric method of enlightenment. It's the most compassionate thing you could do for someone, is save their life. Save them from otherwise eons, more than 3 countless great eons of suffering over and over again. And each time it resets, you forget. You forget that this is possible. So if it has become an option to you in this consciousness, in this lifetime, what else is there to do? And I'm not saying I firmly believe there's not one way to do it. These 5 paths, it's not like you're going to enter the road and you'll see the sign and be like, okay, yes, you've arrived at the path of accumulation. Like, your life is the path. You have to live it. That's how you move through these things. Yeah, and to Santi's point, it's actually the only thing that gives you enough fuel to make it to Tantra. It's not just that desperation of, oh gosh, I don't have 3 countless great eons to do this, right? It's realizing, oh gosh, it's not just me I have to get out of suffering, it's all these beings around me. It's everyone I love, everyone I hate, everyone my mind can conceive of, even the beings I can't see with my eyes, which is so much of the point for me of this course, is that there are, when we say that infinite beings on infinite planets, or when we, put our hands together at the start of a yoga class and say, may this benefit all beings. Like, how far does your mind stretch when you think all beings? Who are you really practicing for? And if for even a second you can get love for them, if you can get this feeling of, I don't want you to have to go through this, then you're desperate to get a faster method, right? Like, then that really fuels you. So yes, it's compassion that gets you there, nothing else. And wisdom, sorry, compassion and wisdom. That would be the one other thing. Okay, here, this is to Sarah, your point. So we end class here. We are in the eon of destruction. The question comes up now, when do Buddhas appear in the world? And here I want to be really clear, this is not when does a prince named, Siddhartha Gautama appear and sit under the Bodhi tree and have the bun and achieve enlightenment, right? It's not that, it's not just that Buddha, but when do Buddhas appear in the world? Who's a Buddha? So I'd say for you, anyone who has spoken some sort of truth that has shaken you to your core, that has caused you to question the world and the way it appears, that has shown you love without conditions, and that has made you believe that it's possible for you to also experience the world like that. That's a Buddha. Maybe you didn't recognize them in that way before, but I don't just mean Shakyamuni Buddha. I mean the Buddhas who appear to you and teach you for real. So when do they appear in the world, right? Question we should all ask ourselves. They say in the Abhidharma Kosha, they don't appear when lifetimes are rising. So they say, like, when people are living for 80,000 years, they don't need Buddhas to come and wake them up to the suffering nature of life. Because they're chilling, they're living for 80,000 years. Like, it's almost, I almost think of it like a form realm birth, right? Like everything's going fine. So they don't appear at that time. They do begin to appear when lifetimes are shrinking. So always on that downward portion of the curve. So that's when Buddhas begin to appear, and it's known as Kalpa Sangpo, like the fortunate eon. So the eon where Buddhas, again, remember that Buddha they operate outside the bounds of time and space. They can appear whenever they want, wherever they want. So the question really here is, when do we have the seeds, the karmas, to see Buddhas as real, right? So just keep that in mind. It's not like Buddha is picking and choosing, oh, I'll appear now versus the other, you know. They're beings of compassion. They have no choice but to appear. It's just, can you see them? Here, the 5 degenerations, you might have heard this as Kali Yuga as well, the degenerate age. And they say that these are 5 signs that the Kalpa Sangpo's end is approaching. This is where we are now. It's here where beings have a lifespan of about 100 years. And these are the 5 things they say are going on. And honestly, at least the way I see the world, I do see this. I do see this as a reality. So this was interesting to me that 2,500 years ago, the Abhidharma Kosha said these 5 things would happen. So they say, 1, human life is very fragile. It's easy to die. If these last few months haven't shown you anything, I think we can have some clarity about that now. It takes a tiny viral cell to kill massive amounts of people. Yes, our human lifespans might be extending. We can live longer, but the diseases that we suffer from are far more than there used to be. Human life is pretty fragile. There's nothing much we can do to extend the use of this human form. People are not attracted to doing good things. I also see this as a reality. I mean, if you look at the people that we have in positions of power, or who dictate a lot of the way culture appears, it's not necessarily based on taking care of others. It's not necessarily like I don't know if we hold selflessness as a, you know, as a celebrity. Like, that's just not the things it's not what we put on a pedestal. We have lousy bodies. That feels a little redundant to 1 for me, but I think the fine print there was, there are more, it's easier to, there are more and more things that could kill you, which I find to be true as well. Number 4, they say food loses its ability to nourish you. And overall, the food and medicine supplies diminish. This feels like, I don't know, predicting the rise of packaged food and the destruction of the food economy and production sources as we know it. To me, it sounds like that's what the Abhidharma Kosha was predicting. And then they say number 5, even ordained people, even people with vows, are not virtuous. Here, I'd say what this looks like is religion as entertainment or as dogma, which so much of religion has become, or spirituality. So it's the difference between I shared this in ACI 7. It just has always helped me. It's like the way we see the world as sliced this way, right? Of like, I practice this thing and I'm this type of thing. I'm Buddhist, or whatever type of ist or ism you have is slicing the world this way. The Dalai Lama says this, but he's like, really, there's only two types of people in the world. You can slice it this way. And it's the people who practice something and the people who don't. And so for me, what number 5 is, it's saying more and more we're seeing maybe people call themselves something, but if you were to enter their internal world, like if you could read their every thought, if you could read their every motivation as they go through their day, or even a second of their day, you'd see that there's no real practice there. There's no real dharma holding them up. So those 5 things are the 5 degenerations. And the idea is that, like, of course, Buddhas, will do everything they can to reach people at this time. It just becomes very hard to. People don't want to hear it. People don't want to hear that the things they do have an effect, that cause and effect function. People don't want to hear that they should treat others not just the way they want to be treated, but better. So that's part of the degenerate age, the 5 degenerations.
So the Buddhas appear around the time the 5 degenerations keep increasing, right? That's what you're saying?
They're saying that Buddhas appear when lifetimes are shrinking, and when the 5 degenerations begin to appear and get worse and worse, it's a sign that Buddhas aren't able to reach people anymore. Like, they're showing up, they're trying to give you the teachings, but people aren't doing anything with them. They're just creating Instagrammable sound bites, right? They're just wearing all the decor, but they're not actually doing the internal practice. So what they say here is, like, all the Buddhas, the teachings will be around, the texts will be around, but the realizations in people's hearts and minds will go away. So you could pick up the Heart Sutra and read it, but you wouldn't have anyone who could help you, or even in your own mind, you wouldn't be able to decode it and actually apply it to your lived experience. And you couldn't ever trigger an actual experience of, let's say, emptiness or bodhicitta. So that's what they mean. I think, yeah, that's what they really mean when they say the Buddhas appear or not.
Is it possible that enough Buddhas appear and do good enough work that this cycle can be shifted? So I mean, it looks very set in stone with these graphs. Like, it's definitely going up, then it comes down. Buddhas arrive, it still keeps going down. Is there any possibility of change in that cycle? Oh, and then it goes up again.
Yeah. As much as your karma changes, it could change. So, yeah. Right? Like, it's a big lesson is a Buddha can never enlighten you. They can never just come and bang you on the head or invoke some crazy, powerful practice and you find yourself in an enlightened realm. That's not how it works. The only thing they can do is teach you.
Yeah, I wonder if it's possible to get to like the around 100 years lifetime cycle, and then it is possible to not go down from there, not degenerate from there. Like, if it's ever possible to reach it, enough people's karma has changed that actually something else changes. We start going back up, like the inevitability of this cycle versus how it is impacted by the bodhisattvas.
Yeah. I'd say that must happen because after an eon of destruction comes an eon of formation. Like, the world ends only to be created again. Right? Like, we're talking about never-ending cycles here. I'd say that the Buddhas that are appearing to come and teach are teaching something beyond that. Like, they're not just telling you how to optimize existence within those cycles, right? They're not just telling you, oh, here's how to extend your life down. Here's how to get the most out of life. It's not that. It's here's how to escape it altogether. They have all the time in the world. They have nothing to do. They're outside of the bounds of time. So they'll come and teach in whatever way possible. So I don't know if that gets at your question, but my understanding is after an eon of destruction comes another eon of formation. It just happens again. And yes, I would imagine that is triggered by those people that come and try to like show people how to be good, in a sense. How to care about someone that's not just yourself. And that will have a result.
Yeah, I believe that overall, with more bodhisattvas and more karmas ripening into something that does maybe, let's say, get outside of this desire realm, like as collective karma changes, the cycle itself, as it's projected on these graphs, has to change as well. You know, like that is kind of also the point, as much as I hate using the word point, because it's not really like, I'm not trying to act inside of this goal, non-goal binary. Like there is no goal, like it's outside of goal, but there must be some sort of possibility of movement towards shifting collective karma so that these cycles don't just happen ad nauseum till the end of time.
Yeah, I'd hope so. I think all those people that are reaching our hearts right now, right? Like the people that we deem revolutionary or actually able to change the way people think, wake them up to something. Yeah, you could call them activists, or you could call them bodhisattvas, or you could call them Buddhas in disguise. Like you can call them whatever they are. But yes, there's always going to be those people. We're always going to create those types of beings, I hope, that keep us close to wisdom.
Sorry, she had to run away because the cat got into something.
Okay.
I was just going to ask, along those same lines, so then is the idea everybody gets enlightened and then there's no more world anymore? Like what happens when everybody's enlightened? And when one being gets enlightened, like this is a little bit maybe too deep, but like are there a set amount of beings that are alive now? And I know there's a whole other course about like past lives and all of that. Like, let's say there's 100 million beings, and then when one gets enlightened, then there's 999, whatever, like one less being. Like I guess really my question is, when everybody's enlightened, there's no more world anymore and there's no more samsara. Is that the point, the where we're headed, hopefully?
I'm trying to think. Because I want to answer with my brain, so I'm trying to let my heart win it. It's like a battle. I think it's kind of like saying, when we all log out of this call, where will we be? Like, what I mean by that is, I guess I can't tell. Are you asking how do enlightened beings perceive samsara? Or how do samsaric beings perceive Buddhas?
Well, yeah, okay. So I'm asking, well, okay, so I guess when everybody's enlightened, then there will be nobody to perceive samsara. That's like samsara only exists because we're not all enlightened yet. Or maybe everybody else is and I'm the last one, but.
That's like often, yeah. So samsara is a projection in the same way enlightenment is a projection. right? So as long as I see samsara, which I can't fool myself, like as much as I want to see enlightenment, I see samsara. I see a world where we're hurting each other and I'm hurt all the time and caught in my own delusion. The day that flips, it will flip completely. And just because it flips for me, it's the same way where, is this a lighter or is it a chew toy? In the same moment, it can't be two things, but two different minds can absolutely perceive it in a radically different way. So right here, I can assure you, someone on this call, for them, this is paradise. This is not samsara. This is not us trying to use words to like get at wisdom. It's something much more exalted, and it's right here. So it's like the data is there, and then what is the forced experience of it based on a projection. It's one of those things where once you remove the source of misunderstanding in your own mind, you would for real not see anyone else suffering. Does that mean that homelessness rates drop and poverty drops? Like it, right? For others, that suffering world could absolutely still exist because they have those karmas. Versus, right? Like it's not I don't know if it's a zero-sum game because it's a projection game. I don't know if I'm answering it at all.
Yes, you are. Thank you. Yeah, that makes more sense. Got to go back to emptiness.
Yeah, and it's the, I mean, at least in this system, it's multiple mind streams. So we're not, there's no collective consciousness that can somehow ascend or rise. Yes, we can all collectively get a little more awake. That's great, but it's an individual mind stream. Each of us. Yeah. Individual noodles. Yes, Sam, to your point, I hope that's not what I meant necessarily. I just, I won't try to qualify. That was perhaps not the most astute example to use. I was just saying that the experience of suffering and enlightenment can coexist in the same way that this being a lighter and a chew toy can coexist. It just depends how many minds are there. It depends who's perceiving it.
Supriya, I have a question about the noodle of consciousness.
Yeah.
So is my mind one noodle, or could I say that my mind is like a plate of spaghetti with a bunch of noodles?
It's one noodle, or it's like if it's a plate of spaghetti, it's like one big noodle. That's all it can.
Okay.
But it's not.
I've had this thought in my mind for a while. Like, it's not possible that like some of my thoughts reach enlightenment while others don't. Okay.
No, in the same way that it's not possible that any % of this is lighter. Because if even 1% of this were lighter, then how could it ever be 100% chew toy to another being? So in the same way, it's it's your mind stream. Nothing escapes your mind stream. So in that way, it's one noodle, like, right? And
yeah,
it's all completely empty of a nature, which is why the day that you do see it flip into an enlightened mind stream, it's completely enlightened.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So are there a finite number of noodles of consciousness? Or
who's talking? Pam.
Yes.
Yes, to be clear, noodles of consciousness is completely a term I made up to help understand the mind stream. That is nowhere in the scripture. Is there a finite number of noodles of consciousness? No, I would say there's an infinite number. It's as many beings as there are that many consciousnesses.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess what I was getting at is, I think similar to some of the other folks' questions around, like, can we all eventually become enlightened and then there is no more suffering?
The question is always for who? So, I mean, yes, that's the goal, I'd say, but it's one of those things. I can't give an answer, mainly because I don't know, and I think it's contemplating this can give you the answer I hope you're looking for. It's a great contemplation.
Okay. I think I might have heard in a Dharma class a long time ago that enlightened beings sometimes go back into samsara just because they want to for some reason. Is that true, or am I making that up?
It comes up, and actually your question that you're asking makes me think of ACI 6, Diamond Cutter Sutra, for those of you who've studied that. And I think it is something you hear about, like bodhisattvas, right? That they choose to come back into suffering life to help others. And the way that it's presented, at least in this system, is the most compassionate thing you could ever want to do is get enlightened fully for the sake of all beings, right? It's like saying, I want to be a surgeon, but I'm going to let everyone else go to medical school before me. You know, like if you really wanted to serve the world that way, you would do everything you can to get the full certification. Here, we're talking enlightenment. Like you would do everything you can to get enlightened. That because you know that's really the only way you could actually help someone. Now, could in that process of getting enlightened, could it make sense, or could you have so much love and compassion in your heart that if given the choice, you would say, yeah, I'll stay behind. Yes. And beautifully, ironically, that's the very thing, that very motivation is going to just push you closer to enlightenment faster. So it's not a simple answer at all, but that's where it kind of gets to in the Diamond Cutter. And even in ACI 2 a little bit, I think some of us who are studying that now, it gets to that sort of what, right? The shepherd, the ferryman, the king.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's dedicate before everything crumbles. And then maybe we'll go back to the slide, because I wanted to ask a question for you all for how do you want to wrap this course up, because we're almost there. But before that, while all of this is fresh in our minds, please just dedicate it to the highest thing that you know. Dedicate it to obliterating any obstacles that you have or that you perceive others as having, to complete and total liberation. Oh, and Vicky and Marissa, if you wouldn't mind closing us out.
Absolutely would not mind. Sashi Paki Jukshin Metotram Lirab Lingshin Indian Pari Sangye Shindu Victory Drogunamdakshinga Jivashu Idam Gururatam Mandalakam Niryalayami Givadi Kivaku Sunam Yeshe Sadzogchen Sunam Yeshe Nejangwe Dambhakani Davasha.
Soups, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm just chatting away. I just said thank you all. I personally, when there are more unanswered questions than answered, I consider it a success because it helps me. I love reckoning with how little I know. So thank you. Please keep coming back. Please keep bringing the questions. I wanted to put this up here because this is where we're at in the course. Next week, it'll be beautiful. I think the death meditation, it's very hard to argue with. It's very real. So I think it'll bring your whole heart. It'll be a special class, both of those. But what I wanted to ask was if people, it could be possible to do the death meditation like all in one class, let's say on Tuesday, and then do Thursday as a review of the whole course. Or if people are up for it, the following Tuesday, which would be the 4th of August, we could do a whole course review then. So maybe think about it, or I guess actually it would be helpful to know before we sign off, because I'll plan accordingly if you feel strongly either way.
Supriya, do you not go on retreat on the 3rd?
Nope, I go on the 7th.
Oh, okay.
The 6th? Sandy knows better than I do. I go on Thursday. So this would be Tuesday. So the 6th, yeah, the 6th.
Can you repeat the date again of the question?
So I guess it would be like, this would be, death meditation would be next Tuesday and Thursday, and then the Tuesday after that, which is the 4th, I think. Let me look.
What is that going to be?
Same time, basically, as we always do, 7:30 to 9:30.
That works for me.
Okay, I'm seeing some yeses.
Yeah, maybe you want to amplify, right before you go on retreat, Supriya.
Oh, it will just
Have a nice review.
0. I'll take full responsibility of whatever comes out of my mouth, but I don't know what it
I'm
will.
good with whatever the group decides, but I'm going to run.
Love you, Mackenzie.
Bye, everyone. Love you.
Okay. I'm seeing for most 2 sessions on death, meditation, and then review. I feel like that makes sense to me, so we can sort of take a break from talking about all the different types of beings. Like next week will really be, it's a very different type of class than we've had so far. It's a little more relatable, I find, because of the relatability of death. So we'll just focus on that. And it really is a meditation for living, really. We can do that Tuesday and Thursday, and then we'll do a full course review. It'll be fun. Next Tuesday after Tuesday.
Hey, Soups.
Yeah.
I came into your class late and I haven't been taking it every week, but talking about like the eons and eons, I remember when I first learned this, I was like, good Lord, how much time do I have to keep doing this?
Yep.
But I don't know if you mentioned like how, I mean, of course you guys went through like a human life versus all the other kinds of beings, but just how close we all are to like you've gone through so many eons already, right? Like,
yeah,
you have this human life, and to be hearing Dharma and contemplating this kind of wisdom, however it hits you, it's like you've had so many eons of being here, already accumulating merit and wisdom. So feel encouraged.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. It's true. Yeah, it's very true. It's, you know, that thing that's going around, which is like blowing my mind around, like it's so hard for us to even conceive of like what a billion is, or like what a billionaire would be. I think there's like using the conversion of a millionaire would be in seconds, it would be 11 days, and a billionaire would be in seconds 32 years. And like with what Santi is saying, the implication is we have taken birth and rebirth billions and billions of times, great eons worth of times, to get to where we are, where these words and images on a slide could actually mean something. I hope they mean something. I hope they wake something up for you. I mean, that's the short answer, Viggy, to your question. I became a believer. I mean, I began putting karma and emptiness through the vehicle of my life because it was the thing that worked better than anything else. And it gave me the sense that I've been trying for way longer than I thought. Yeah. I'm glad, Pam. Chloe, I don't understand your math, but okay, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording.